ABS Media Demo.
24 minutes to 11, and turning our attention now to the coverage of Madiba's hospital visit last week. There was a media frenzy when it was reported that he was in hospital, and the only information available for 2 days was that he was undergoing routine tests. Media was barred from the Mill Park Hospital, and finding official comment was the most difficult thing for anyone working in the media. And the media was accused of insensitivity, of being un-African, but can one blame them when no one would comment on what was happening with our beloved statesman? Deputy President Kgalema Motlanthe hosted a press conference on Friday and alleviated our fears and admitted that all of this could have been handled better. But the question is, where do the boundaries lie, though, in our quest to know, and of course Madiba's own privacy? We'll hear from you. 0891104207, 0891104207, SMSs to 34701. My guests this morning are Martin Slabbert, who is Senior Account Executive with the HWB Communications, as well as Khomutso Mweketsi, who is Manager in the Office of the CEO at the Media Development and Diversity Agency. Thank you so much to both of you for your time this morning.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for the invitation. Hi, Siggy.
Hi Khomutso, and hi to you, Martin, as well. Martin, let me start with you. Many people saying complete PR disaster. Your thoughts?
Absolutely.
ABS
I think
Media
that sums it up perfectly. The one thing we always tell people is, in your company, in your organization, whichever sector you're in, the question you have to ask yourself is, what is the worst possible thing that could happen to your company, your organization, and are you prepared for it? And obviously with the Nelson Mandela Foundation, the worst possible thing would be if he passes away. And last week's event showed that, definitely from a communications point, they were not prepared. They did not know who was supposed to talk. They could not put forward an authoritative spokesperson. They gave conflicting information. They lied to the media, and that basically created the storm that we saw last week.
ABS
And your thoughts, I mean, firstly they were talking about they weren't sure what the protocol was, who was supposed to speak and who wasn't. And then we got a one-liner about undergoing routine tests, and then a complete shutdown. Could they have saved it? I mean, all of this starting on Wednesday. Was there a point at which they could have saved it when journalists started camping out at the hospital?
The best thing they could have done, Tiki, is to get a spokesperson, decide between themselves and leave any turf battles, leave that aside. This is not the time for a battle over who controls and whose turf this is. Put a spokesperson in front of the media right then and there and say, guys, this is what we can tell you right now. We will have a press briefing every hour, every 2 hours, but we will talk to you. We won't just shut down. Put a person right there. All the media were already there. So you had a captive audience, if you want to call it, right there outside the hospital. Get a spokesperson, stand in front of them, put some microphones up, and tell the media what is happening. I think people, the response that we saw where people said they couldn't understand the media frenzy. A good way to describe it is imagining you tell a child that his dad is in hospital, that he is sick, and then just keep quiet, and then you're amazed if the child the response is emotional. That is exactly what happened last week. This is a very important person, not just to this country, but to the world. He is a living legend. Don't just tell us he is in hospital and then keep quiet.
Khomutso, hi. You, of course, with the Media Development and Diversity Agency, there were some who said that the media's response was insensitive, it was un-African, it was inappropriate. What are your thoughts?
Well, ultimately, the one thing that we can never be oblivious of is that we have never experienced anything like this in South Africa. And the truth of the matter is there was a concession that came from government side that, in hindsight, they could have done it better. But ultimately, a media close-off is not something that is unheard of in circumstances like this. When Michael Jackson died, it took a long... I remember there was a soccer game that was happening that particular night here in South Africa as part of the prelude to the World World Cup.
Yeah.
And
AVS
it took
media
hours
demo.
and hours of, the media being closed off and nobody not really knowing what it is that, was happening with Michael Jackson. And I think a good 6 to 8 hours later, the world found out that Michael Jackson had died. The truth of the matter is we cannot, however, be oblivious of the fact that as much as Nelson Mandela is owned by the world, is owned by South Africa,
AVS
is loved by
media
everybody, he equally is very much loved by members of his family and the people that are closest to him. I think the media can take learnings from this particular experience, but equally too can the Nelson Mandela Foundation. I agree entirely with the statements of the Deputy President, Kgalema Motlanthe, who said the communication could have been handled better. And at the same vein, though, we have to find ways as
AVS media
Africans
demo.
to know how to deal with this thing for ourselves, seeing we've never experienced this. There's dynamics to our media space, to our country, to our culture that are different to the dynamics of America in relation to the Michael Jackson issue, or the UK in the way that they treat issues of the media.
Yeah.
I drove past Mill Park Hospital on one of the 2 days, and it was the most
AVS
horrendous
media
experience.
demo.
I'd never experienced anything like that. The one good thing is I think learnings have been taken by everybody. I think it has been open from the time that he left the hospital. We've been constantly updated, but ultimately nobody can ever really be well prepared for something like
Yeah.
this. Because Nelson Mandela is who he is,
Yeah.
nobody thinks of the word death being
AVS
associated
media
with him.
demo.
And ultimately, we know better now.
Where do you draw that, those lines and those boundaries? As you say, on the one hand, he is the father of the nation. We all call him Dada. He is our beloved statesman. And on the other, he has a right to privacy. His family has the right to that privacy. How should we
AVS
as the media
media
handle and draw that line?
Yeah, the truth is media should always adhere to its professional code of ethics at all times. I mean, it's your job to deliver on news. But I don't know if I entirely agree with my panelists that on the hour, every hour, somebody has to be giving us an update. The truth of the matter is when you're ill, think of yourself. When you're ill, you're ill.
AVS
And most of the time
media
you
demo.
surround yourself with your unit of support, your support system, whether that be your family or your friends, and you yourself do not know what tomorrow is going to be like. So how then ultimately do you expect the Mandela family or the Nelson Mandela Foundation or everybody that surrounds him to be able to give you update at that time? I'm assuming, and I wasn't at the hospital, but I'm assuming that the
AVS
doctors are doing
media
everything
demo.
that they can do to see to it that he's well, and will report at a time that is appropriate to particularly the patient and then everybody that surrounds him. I think what we do is sometimes we have to learn to give people a certain amount of space. But I agree that 2 days of us being told that no, he's in the hospital for tests is way too long. And I think
AVS
everybody
media
who
demo.
is involved in this matter agrees that they could have handled it better. And handle it better, it looks like they have.
We'll take your calls 0891 104 207, 0891 104 207, SMSs to 34701. Don in Cape Town, morning.
Who?
Don?
Yes,
Hi,
yes.
Don.
AVS media
I'd
demo.
just like to sort of, as an example of how the media should handle a person of international fame, is like when the late Pope died. It was regular on TV, on radio.
AVS
Vatican
media
officials
demo.
would regularly tell you where he was. Was he getting better? Was he not? Was he deteriorating? Was he not? And, I mean, I wasn't only in South Africa at that time, I was also in Scotland. And in Scotland you had it on TV, and nobody was in doubt
AVS
as to
media
what was
demo.
happening.
Yeah.
And that to me was, sort of, when it comes to a world figure, that's how it should be.
All right. Thanks, Don.
Right, bye.
Bye. Thanks. That's Don in Cape Town. Carl in the Western Cape.
Hi, man. I just would like to ask.
Carl, is
yes?
your radio
AVS
on?
media
Yeah, I'll
demo.
put it off.
Please.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you, or the person there. Doesn't this go to the heart of the relevance of the Nelson Mandela Foundation? Isn't it time that they hand over all the affairs either to the state or the African National Congress? A lot of the conflict and confusion came
AVS
about
Media
as a
Demo.
result of conflict between the family, the ANC, and the Nelson Mandela Foundation. I'll listen on the radio.
All right. Thanks, Carl. That's Carl in the Western Cape. We'll take more calls, 0891 104 207, SMSs to 34701. Martin, we should maybe start with Carl, because he's asking now the question of the relevance of the foundation. It's a question I think most of the Sunday papers yesterday were also raising.
Well, I think Cole raises a very good point there, and it again goes back to my advice from earlier. The foundation, the ANC, the government, all the different role players must now sit down and decide who does what and make sure that everyone knows what the rules are and that they know what the protocol is. Because this was a dress rehearsal for something that is going to be very sad, but unfortunately is inevitable. And unfortunately, Nelson Mandela won't be around forever. That is just a fact of life. And are we prepared for that sad day when he finally leaves us? And does the Nelson Mandela Foundation, does government, does the military health services, do they all know exactly who will talk?
Can I come in?
Yes.
Can I come in there? Right there, for me, as a black African person, it's un-African to ever anticipate anyone's death, irrespective of how old they may be. They can be 100 years old. We sit and we celebrate. We say, you've made it up to now. And for me, yes, I agree to a large extent that Nelson Mandela is owned by the world, but I think we have to zone in and hone in on how we want to conduct ourselves should that time come, without necessarily walking around like we're anticipating his death, because ultimately we as the Media Diversity and Development Agency, what we want is to wish him well. And I think if as a nation we focus all our energy on wishing him well, because what we know now is, we do know he's in good spirits. We do know he's getting his health back day by day, and that day will come. But do we want to conduct ourselves as Africans in the way that everybody has conducted themselves under such circumstances? Do we, knowing what it is that we stand for, the ethics that make us who we are as African people? I cannot advocate what that is, but I think a discussion has to be had as to how we'll conduct ourselves, at that time, without necessarily saying we're anticipating his death. I think Madiba's wisdom is still very much needed in South Africa today, and we have to work as a collective energy towards believing that he will be well, and he will be with us at least for a while still to come.
But isn't that vacuum that was created by a lack of regular updates opening up the space for speculation? I know a lot of print journalists and editors who received SMSs proclaiming his death, and they restrained themselves, didn't publish those comments because...
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think we all collectively agree, government agrees. I think that there is still a role for the Nelson Mandela Foundation to play. I think the thing that you need to remember about Nelson Mandela is there's many tiers and many layers to his life. So is the case with everybody. And the Nelson Mandela Foundation has done tremendously amazing work for his life up until now. Like I said, I think at the beginning of this discussion is that because in an African way, nobody ever prepares for this thing. Nobody in the foundation was ultimately prepared for this thing, and they didn't know how to conduct themselves or what to say. And I think that we have to take lessons from the fact that they themselves have conceded to, taking lessons in this. And the mere idea that a concession came from government through the voice of the Deputy President says an utmost of a lot that, we want to do things differently. Is it cool to have the media camp out? It looks like internationally that's how people conduct themselves, but allow the family the space to want to talk to you at the time that's convenient for them. I think the difference of opinion that I have as compared to my panelists is that I wouldn't, as a member of the family, give updates every hour on the hour. I probably, at the end of every day would say, the tests are being continued or whatever the case may be, because ultimately the state that has to be most protected is that of the patient.
All right, Martin?
With respect to Khomotsa, I must on your last point about how often and how regular information must come out.